Alright. So we're live. All right, well, let's get started. Hopefully we'll have some more people come. I think this thing is locked. It's not open, so you'll have to open the door for anybody that wants to come.
Or you might just keep it like that.
Well, it won't.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
So, I mean, yeah.
I think that's kind of open.
Or we could put a plant. I don't know if you want to put a plant, maybe. I just don't want a lot of the outside noise.
Yeah.
You know, just open. If you see something, just open the door. All right. Well, welcome everybody. Happy New Year. We'll just jump right in. Any sort of updates from everyone, or should we just get going? Let's go for it. All right. Let's do the 3 ohms, and then we'll do the opening prayers. Vakratunda Mahakaya Surya Koti Samaprabha Nirvignam Kuru Me Deva Sarvakareshu Sarvada Saraswati Namastubhyam Varade Kamarupini Vidyarambam Karishyami Siddhir Bhavatu Me Sada Om Bhur Bhuvasuvaha Tatsavitur Varinyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yona Prachodayat. Om Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Devo Maheshwaraha Guru Sakshat Parabrahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. All right, let me put on some softer music. Okay, let's do go. I always hate that dead silence. Nope. There we go. All right. So everyone got a copy of the handout for today? All right, perfect. So we're going to do chapter 9. And so if you look at the handout first, before we get into the actual chapter, if you see at the very top, you'll see chapter 9, 10, 11, and 12. This is actually kind of the outline of the things that are going to be coming for the next 4 chapters. So we're going, really heavy into kind of the philosophy of devotion, essentially, and the devotional aspect of everything. Because I think up until now, in the Gita, and a lot of our conversations have really been more heavily philosophical and more abstract, and a lot more of kind of that non-dual or somewhat non-dual, Vedanta kind of thing. And I think this now is sort of shifting gears a little bit and kind of opening up the devotional aspect of things, which I think sometimes if you don't work your way all the way through, people sometimes you can lose people if it seems like it's too dry and it's too abstract and it's not got enough of the other. So just so that way you can kind of see the overall workflow. And then just as sort of a side note, one of the other things, we had a thread on the, what do you call it, WhatsApp, where we were talking about some of this. And one of the things I wanted to bring into these chapters as sort of side things was talking about some of the different sub-schools of philosophy that focus more so on devotion, because a lot of this is not that difficult to understand intellectually, at least. And so I thought it might be a good opportunity to at least introduce these other schools of thought, because a lot of us, especially those of us that come at it from the Western perspective, almost everything that we read is pretty much almost exclusively, if you're not doing ISKCON and the Hare Krishnas and doing that part of it, you're doing hardcore Advaita Vedanta. And, a lot of the Madhava Acharyas, the Brahmanujas, all of those guys are completely lost to the Western mind, or for the most part anyway. So for me, it was a discovery to kind of like, oh, wow, I just thought that it was sort of Shankaracharya was sort of the end all be all. And no one had actually even questioned it. That was just sort of the final thought, and it's like, oh, turns out people do question his thought process and and then that does bring it to, well, then which one's right? And then which one do we believe, and then that becomes a little bit harder, and then I think we have to start listening to the people who've reached those summits of knowledge and sort of get their advice, since we're still down in the valleys of ignorance, So that's kind of how I wanted to sort of structure. I thought it might be nice to structure it. So if we get into the actual chapter, so it's obviously, has a lot of, have read a lot of the different translations kind of prepping for these. It's Raja Vidya, so that's like the king of knowledge. It gets called all kinds of stuff. The sovereign secret, the royal path, the king of knowledge, the king of secrets. So a lot of people will translate this slightly differently. But I guess the question is, just so that we're taking that sort of 30,000 foot view, what do you guys feel is the king of secrets as described, or what are your thoughts on kind of what they're talking about in this chapter, assuming we've looked at it already? Like, what's the royal secret? Like, what's the take home, I guess, because it's like the royal secret, right? So Krishna's giving him this big secret, and what is that? Anyone?
You are there, like it says here. So it's within you, but you have to realize that you are there, and it can only be realized with love. That's what I understand right now.
Right.
And it's not just in you, it's in others as well.
Right.
So you should see Krishna everywhere, in everything that you experience, every people you meet, in every work that you do, you dedicate it to him. So that's what.
Right.
Yeah, like whatever name I read, it just appeared, it was a little confusing because how in the previous how we have this is good, this is bad and all that, but in this chapter it just seems like everything is Krishna.
Right.
Good, bad, evil, whatever you define, insect, human, soil, earth, star, you name it all, and as like these guys said, in each of these phrases, it's like, it's all me. So if you think it's a heartbreak, it's bad, that's me. If you think it's a success, it's good, that's me. So that's what I'm understanding. It's a little confusing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, and so I think that it's sort of the summary of that royal secret is that God is, immanent, meaning it's our highest nature, it's our true self, and then transcendent is in all, everywhere, at all times, right? Beyond time, in that sense. So so that's sort of the royal secret. Now, again, we kind of somewhat take that for granted because we've had lots of conversations about this and we've heard lots of things over the years, but this is where he's really first defining that, so one of the things that kind of came to my mind, and I tried to thread in over the chapter, so kind of like when we talk about like some of the past chapters, the Mahavakyas, the great sayings, right? Come on in. There's one of the handouts is on the paper right there. So those Mahavakyas. So in the chapter 2, and that's the handout, I put the Pragyam Brahma. So that is Pragya meaning consciousness, and then Brahma like Brahman. So the consciousness within us that we can all appreciate, because it's like, well, this all feels very intellectual. How do we appreciate that? And the first Mahavakya, the first great saying is consciousness itself is Brahman, right? And we know that because we talked about it, but that's that first one. And then in chapter 4, I put in sort of our notes when we were talking about Ayam Atma Brahma. So this Atman, right, that sort of individualized soul, I guess, if we want to call it that way, not exactly, but right, is also then Brahman. And then in this one, if we kind of say, well, we're God, then the third sort of Mahavakya is probably the most famous one, right, is the Tattvam Asi, right, that you are that, right? And so in that one, if you look at and I put the reference so that way you guys can always look at it, and that's sort of the first bullet point is that, it's from the Chandogya Upanishad, and it's a whole dialogue with a father and his son goes and studies with some guru, and he comes off and he's very sure of himself and he thinks he knows everything. Then he goes back and his dad's like asking him a question and he's clearly hasn't learned, and so the dad's kind of going through things and saying, you're that, you're that, you are that, you are that. So this is probably the single most famous Mahavakya that's out there. I'm sure you guys have come across it many times. And then, of course, there's one more to go that we'll put, when we're kind of working our way up the Aham Brahmasmi, right? I am Brahman, And those 4 Mahavakyas really do summarize the Upanishads. Like you can save yourself an awful lot of time and just know the 4 Mahavakyas, and you can save yourself from reading all the Upanishads if you don't necessarily want to read them.
Is consciousness Brahman as well?
Yeah.
But isn't consciousness governed by 3 modes of nature?
So consciousness is beyond the 3 modes of nature, right? So if we think, again, the first Mahavakya, Pragyam Brahma. So God, Brahma, basically Brahma by being Brahman, right? So that consciousness, when we appreciate consciousness, that we are appreciating Brahman within us, right? Or if we want to look at it more from the microcosmic sort of versus the macrocosmic, we'll say Atman to differentiate. But ultimately, it's the same thing, right? So that's why when we look at the 3 modes of nature, the 3 modes of nature are kind of how consciousness comes together with matter. It kind of puts it together to create the manifest universe in this philosophy, okay? So that consciousness is then beyond that. So when we look, like in the diagram that we had from chapter 7, where we were talking about, and we were kind of using the Samkhya philosophy, where Purusha, right, is that undifferentiated consciousness in some ways. In some way, it gets Purusha, just that term gets used slightly differently in different contexts. So I always find it very confusing. That's why and I think that's why the Vedantins have cleaned it up a little bit by saying Brahman and Atman and Jiva. I think it's easier to understand versus higher Purushas and lower Purushas and this Purusha. It's like, well, wait a minute, like, which one are you talking about? Like, I find it confusing because you're using the same word but differently, and it's like, I don't understand all of that. But yeah, so everything, that consciousness is going to be beyond the modes of nature. The consciousness, but at that highest consciousness, then that Brahman, right, is going to be that undifferentiated, unmoving, unaffected, behind everything. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then again, if you want to look at it, if we want to bring in, again, and then, so then they'll break it down where we're talking about different schools. So let's say the tantrics, right? The tantric philosophies. The nice thing about that philosophy, and I think complements this really nicely, is that Brahman is, in the Vedantic sense, not moving, it's static, it's unaffected, it doesn't do anything. It's the background matrix of the entirety of creation, right? So then you're sitting there and you're like, well, why is there creation then if Brahman is unaffected and doesn't do anything and doesn't want to do anything, and the world and the universe is moving and manifests and has all this stuff? And so then the tantrics, they'll call what we call Brahman, they'll call it Shiva, right? And then they'll flip the coin over, and then the manifest aspect of it, the movement aspect of Brahman, they call Shakti, right? Or Shiva and Shakti. So as when we have an unaffected, unmoving, sort of that, we'll say Brahman, and then they'll say or Shiva, and then Shakti. They don't really have within Vedanta as good of a model when it comes to that. Usually then they'll say, well, Brahman is unaffected by anything, but then Brahman has its Maya Shakti, right? The power of illusion, which then in a certain sense becomes like when Brahman gets sort of swapped through Maya, then that becomes Ishvara, right? The manifest, personalized God, right? And so then Ishvara then becomes the underlying matrix that starts off to sort of the whole of creation, and then it all kind of goes off to the races. Or again, they'll sometimes use Samkhya philosophy and they'll talk Purusha and Prakriti, right? So there's some overlapping as the philosophies sort of affected each other. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any comments so far on all of that? Just jumped right into.
I'm confused about Adi Deva and Brahman.
Adi Deva from last chapter. So yeah. So if you look at so Adi, right, means sort of like the highest, right? So like Adi Shankara, right? Adi Deva. So when you look at this, I thought I had it on here. The Adi Bhuta, right, is going to be more like that body kind of part. I think the Adi Deva, in some ways, is almost like a jiva, and then in a way. And then you have the Adhyatma is that highest Atma, the highest soul.
So you would maybe correlate Brahman consciousness with
Adhyatma. Because that's going to be the highest. It's interesting to me too, because they talk about this like in that particular chapter, but you don't read about this anywhere else. And so it's I even struggled with, and I'm like, well, wait a minute, like how does that sort of correlate with some of the other stuff that we learn? So I don't personally love this terminology. I mean, it was in the chapter, so we kind of had to go through it. But if we look at where it says on that, so the Adi Deva is the Purusha, the faculty that resides over the instruments of knowledge in action. Some people define it as the Hiranyagarbha. Sometimes it's the Purusha. So again, it's for me that sort of thing, because you have to realize, right, like the Gita was written before Vedanta existed, right? So there was the Upanishads, but those were still being loosely compiled. They weren't really consolidated. And then, a lot of these philosophies, so the Ramanujas, the Adi Shankaracharyas, all of these guys haven't come around yet. And so then you have kind of, I think in some ways within the Gita, a little bit more of a older kind of, it's still sort of Samkhya based mostly, right? They don't talk about Atman and Brahman and all that jivas. There's not that language in the Gita, right? And so then it's like, well, why isn't all that in the Gita? It's kind of weird. Like you'd think it'd be in the Gita of all places, but it's not. And if you think about it, even in the
people came and they went out.
No, those are from next door. So I think it's because of that. So that's why I do like some of the kind of this other nomenclature that they talk about, because for me, it's a lot easier to understand, at least intellectually. Because again, like they'll talk about high Purusha, low Purusha, right? And I'm like, well, wait a minute, isn't Purusha beyond? So how are we talking? And then so sometimes they're talking about Purusha, like low Purusha, almost like it's Prakriti. and sometimes they talk about Purusha like it's almost like it's Brahman. Right? Yeah. So for me, so the Adhyatma is the closest sort of thing that I understand. It's like that, it's it says here, right? The unperishable Brahma. So like when you look at chapter 8, just really quick, so the highest nature, all of that goes every creature, its existence, and lives in every creature. That's the Adhyatma. That's easy. So that's Atma, kind of a Brahman. Then my action bringing, and then Adhibhuta is the body, so that's easy. Boom. And then the Deva, again, here we go. Here's the Purusha. So then how is that different than the Atma? And so again, this is where I think the nomenclature, and then Adi Yagya, right? That's the supreme sacrifice. Okay, that's also easy. But again, this is where that using the Purusha wording in different contexts, I think for me, and I think for a modern reader, kind of gets confusing. But yeah, but that's kind of, and there's like Swami Chinmayananda, for example. I don't know if you've ever seen any of his books. He has what they call the BMI chart, not the body mass index kind of thing. It's the body, mind, intellect, and he breaks it down. And so I'm going to bring that into one of the chapters in the future. It's just, there wasn't room in these chapters. And then there's another, again, we touched on it last time, the Panchakoshas, right? So I think the 5 layers, right, with all of that, the Annamaya Kosha and all of those things. And then the subtle body, the gross body, the causal body, I want to bring some of that stuff in that's coming. And I think when you start conceptualizing or seeing those layers, for me, that's a lot easier to understand than this Adideva, Adibhuta. Because now you have okay, I have the food sheath, I have the prana sheath, I have the mind sheath, the intellect sheath, and then the causal sheath, right? So I think that for me is a lot easier to understand personally. Anything else? And you can just go back and forth. This is all like I said.
You said the whole concept of Vedanta, Ved Vedanta, was established by Adi Shankaracharya in the 6th century, right?
I mean, it's not that, I think he's just the most well-known, right?
Yeah.
What
things got lost, and then he came back, he made the ways to okay, you could do this on this track, and you do that on that track.
Yeah.
But if you look at who wrote all these scriptures, I was trying to search that off past week.
Uh-huh.
And then it was Ved Vyas was called Krishna, and then he had some other name, and then he was called the knowledge god.
Right.
And then the Acharyas decided that he has to write all the scriptures because the Vedas were too large for anyone to read. So he started dividing the Vedas first.
Right.
And then he started writing the Brahma Sutra, that's the gist of the Vedas. And then it came on he kept on writing all these books and scriptures.
That's crazy. Look how much he did. It's amazing.
But then I was who's father of Ved Vyas? And then it was Rishi Parashara, and then he's the one who made this Vedic astrology thing. And then I was who's his father? And then
You just went down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, 3 chains down, 3 fathers above, and then I reached Brahma itself.
Right.
So it was it's even these texts are illusion, right? According to Ashtravarta. We can't achieve God with intellect. It's we need wisdom for that. We need love for that.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, no. I mentioned Adi Shankaracharya because I think he's just, when you think of an Advaita Vedanta, he's the guy. No, there's all kinds of other non-dual Advaita Vedanta gurus, right? I mean, of course, many. So, Yajnavalkya and the Upanishads, and Vyas, obviously, and there's so many. I'm just saying, when you look at most things or what most people are familiar with that study at least a little bit of Indian philosophy, right? It's Shankar, it's Ramanuja, it's Madhava, it's Chaitanya, it's these guys, right?
And I came across one more thing that was why do we worship Krishna as the closest comparison to Brahman? It's because he's called the Purnavatara. That means he has all the 16 qualities that the Brahman has,
right? And
we could manifest them in an ideal form. That's Krishna. But if you want to consider Krishna within us, we could see the 5 Pandavas as our 5 injuries, and then
Mhm.
our souls like drop to the end. Like Krishna is the soul, and then we as a jiva is dropped to the like. If you depend upon the five senses that we have, the indriya, like the Pandavas, no one's going to help us, or like the Maya around us won't help us. So it's like the soul within us is going to help us because that's the true Brahman.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, there's so much symbolism in the stories that we can, you can spend lifetimes just in the one thing. No, absolutely. So, yeah, this is just a sort of a superficial first pass. You know what I mean, in a certain sense. So yeah, I mean, that's again the beauty of the Gita is it's like the Bible. You can read it in so many different times and get something different out of it every single time. As we evolve and as our understanding deepens, you know, you're going to pull different things out of it at different times for sure. And same with the Upanishads.
Yeah, and I also learned like when I was traveling in Himalaya, so near Mana village, there's like a cave which is called Vedvyas cave where we sat down and spoke and Ganesh told her the scripture thing. But I learned because then you again travel on the other side of the Himalayas, there's a whole Vedvyas cave. And I learned that Vedvyas is actually not a name of a person, it's actually a title.
A title.
Like sir or doctor. So whoever writes that Vedvyas. So
whoever joins the Vedas or
something
right
writing or is knowledgeable of that thing. So it's not just one person. It's like multiple people probably who have been writing that. Otherwise, I had that notion too that
But
it's just Vedas.
Right.
But it's like probably it's just a title to given to the person who's writing. And on the Adi Sankaracharya, when I was learning more in those areas, it was like he's the recent. He's the latest who tried to save. And he was pretty young. I think he died at 32 or 33.
Shankar?
Yeah, Adi Sankaracharya.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So he, it's just, I don't know, the prodigy or something, or a genius when they're a kid. So he started doing that when he was 6, and it's like the title was given to him because it's like again a verbal, not a battle, but you know, where you show that you understand all the concepts or not. And he came to Gaya region and all, where there were a lot of other knowledgeable people, or you call them Pandit in that language. And he gave all the philosophies, which was pretty what you were saying in the beginning, pretty against of what his philosophy was. But he sort of beat them in the debate, because everything is debate in Hinduism, right? So, and that's where he went about, and mostly in the Himalayan region, you will see every temple has like Adi Sankaracharya at the back of it, because he established it thinking, okay, this is where these philosophies will lie. So I think he's the most recent one who tried bringing some meaning through what all the Veds and Upanishad things were kind of tough, but pretty sure others.
More that I think also, like if you look at just a historical context with him in particular, is, you know, you have to we tend to forget and we tend to think of India as a Hindu country, which obviously it is. But back when we're talking about this time, you know, Ashoka was a Buddhist, right? The Buddhist sort of influence within India was not to be, we tend to forget about that, right? Because Buddhism is largely, not driven out because it's there, but it's not very prominent in India anymore, right? And, you know, because if you think about it, you know, you had that sort of Brahmin culture where it was so, you know, it was all the havans and it was all the ritualistic kind of stuff, right? And really devoid in some ways of a lot of people I don't think were spending as much of the time understanding like the Upanishad part of it, and really just stuck in all the ritualistic stuff. And then of course, humans being humans, then the Brahmins are going to use that power and the caste system and blah, 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 that we're all very familiar with. And now you've got Buddha coming in, and in a certain sense, I think in some ways, Buddha's influence was probably one of the best things that ever happened to Hinduism, believe it or not, you know, ironically.
Yeah.
Because then I think the Buddhist influence, and you know, you had Nalanda University and you had all that influence, I think in a certain sense forced the Hindu intellectuals to kind of get a little bit like back on get back on track in a way. And that's maybe not the most articulate way to say it, but and that's why you even see it in the Gita. There's a lot of stuff where they're kind of like downplaying or putting down kind of the ritualistic aspect of stuff like, hey, you worship these gods, you'll go to the gods, but if you want to kind of do the higher, you need to kind of go beyond that. And so I think these are subtle digs that are happening where now you've got this resurgence of a little bit more of an advanced philosophy that in a certain sense could take on Buddhism. And that's why I think there's so many of the things. So like, for example, one of a famous book, if you ever want a hard book to read, if you want to melt your brains out, is at the end of the Mandukya Upanishad, there's the Karika. And that's where it's kind of like the Ashtavakra Gita or some of that, where it's like, it's the most abstract, nothing exists, it's all illusion, it's, so these are the guys, and some of the people accuse the author of that, of actually having a Buddhist influence, because there's so much similarity with Buddhism, with it. Just there's little subtleties about, is it, is the highest everything, or is it nothing? Is it emptiness, or is it fullness? Blah, 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 blah. So there's little philosophical differences, but I think personally, so then you get Adi Shankaracharya, who then sort of represents an intellectual resurgence within the Indian Hindu tradition to kind of, and I think that he's in many ways probably a lot of the reason why Buddhism sort of then got, sort of fell back out of favor, at least within the Indian sort of context. I mean, I'm not an Indian religious philosophy historian scholar by any means, but
it's like Buddhism and like Jainism were based out of atheism because they didn't want to like make anyone worship anything, and that's perfectly right, because it's like everything around you is like suffering, and your desires are the root cause of suffering. That's what Buddhism said. And we humans, we always desire stuff.
Right.
And we want to desire that we achieve Brahman. That's also suffering.
Right. So yeah, so I think, so it's interesting, like the interplay of those two philosophies and how they come through. But then again, a lot of people then recognized, that not everyone can understand all of that. And, it's really, really hard to understand truly the highest level of Advaita Vedanta. I mean, we don't live in that world. We live in a 3D world with dualism and stuff like that. And so I think that's where some of these other things, kind of come into play, where, they'd say, look, maybe or maybe not, that's true, but, maybe we need to sort of think about it a little bit differently, So actually that kind of, well, since we're on the, are we good with all this? I mean, we're just chatting, we can keep going on this sort of side, or we can keep diving back in.
Yeah, in the ninth chapter, I have confusion between in the fourth, fifth, and sixth.
Which one? In ninth?
Ninth, yes.
Yeah.
Fourth, fifth, and sixth.
Okay.
So I'm confused. The terminology is between existence, and then dwell, and then confine. So like in one line, all creatures find their existence in me. And the fifth was translation. These creatures do not really dwell in me. And then, in the fifth line itself, it says, I'm not confined to it. So I'm not able to wrap my head around the meaning. But I do understand existence, dwell, and confine.
Those are hard. They're hard.
Yeah, and I'll add to it because I had the same confusion, but 4, 5, 6, and then if you go to 23, 24, 25. So from all of this, I was kind of getting like what we started with, that I'm everywhere, in everything, good, evil, bad, whatever. But in this 25, it's like those who worship the devas will go to the realm of devas, like you said recently. Those who worship their ancestor will be united with them after death. Those who worship phantom will become phantom, but my devotees will come to me. And like, aren't you all? So I just got confused, and that's the contradiction was from the fourth fifth, and then back at the 23, 24, 25.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Does anyone want to jump in on that, and then give you a chance?
It's all him, but it's like, what part of him do you want actually? That's what he's trying to say. It's like, if I want to be the most richest, I could be Indra, and then I go on all these material nature, and then I could go to his heavenly abode. That's what we say, but we don't know if there is a heavenly abode, and if it's you're gonna come back in the human form and be a rich person, you could do that. But if you want to be a place where there is no positive, no negative. That's where Brahman or Krishna is. And then if you achieve that state of, I don't know if I'm confusing you.
Because in my head, it's going like whatever you're describing, like rich or poor, it's all that thing. I mean, it's the element, it's all the same thing.
But it's your desire, like
It's
you're,
like
you're supposed
subset
to do that.
versus set thing, you know, in the maths that we do. So for me, it's like, okay, if like the fabric, this couch is made of a fabric, so this fabric is a couch. So that's how my head is, you know. That even if you pray to ancestors, even if you're praying to phantoms, even if you're praying to certain nature or certain deva,
But that's within Maya, so that's within the illusion itself.
but that all dwells to one thing, like, right, like Krishna.
But
Okay, maybe you can worship them, but you need to realize that even they are a form of Krishna. Maybe
Right.
they will get
Right.
Krishna.
It's like,
So here's a perfect. Here's maybe an indirect. I'm going to ask you a rhetorical question. So let's say I'm a Westerner who knows nothing about Hinduism, okay? And I come to you and I'm like, hey, you're a Hindu, right? And you know I love you. I love that you come, Ben. I really do. It really makes me feel happy. No, I'm serious.
I
appreciate you. So a Westerner comes up to you and says, okay, I've heard on the one hand that Hinduism has 330 million gods. But then on another hand, I hear that Hindus claim that they are monotheistic and they only have one God. Which one is it?
First and the second one.
It's the second one?
Yeah, because all the 33 kotis is not literally 33 millions, but it's 33 kotis. They are all manifestations depending on your feelings, your desires, and stuff like that. Basically, it's just one.
but there could be infinite God. If I really dance God in Hinduism, I could worship Him.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, that's true.
But listen to the reason I ask you that question is because I think you just answered, in a way, your own question, at least for that part. For the, so you just answered, I think, your own question, at least regarding the those who worship the devas, the ancestors, and the you know whatever, that each of those devas, each of those are going to represent a certain kind of level of consciousness, a certain level of understanding. We live in this plane of consciousness. We don't know how many other infinite numbers of planes of consciousness. So I guess okay, let me ask you another question. Do you believe, and this is a loving, sincere question, okay, because just for the discussion's sake, do you believe that Ganesha exists? Do you believe Saraswati exists? Do you believe Shivji exists? Do you believe in Indra? Do you believe in Agni? Do you believe in Durga? Do you believe in any of that? And if so, how? If it's only one, right? So how would those exist? If you believe in them, if you believe they're actually true and not just symbolic, but you're doing puja, okay, Ganesha, help me do good on my dissertation, whatever. Do you believe that there's a Ganesha God somewhere in the manifest universe that in a certain sense is hearing your prayer and helping you in a sense?
Well, I genuinely believe that they're all stories.
Okay, no, that's fine. This is the discussion.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's like, again, it's like at certain point of your time, suppose you need strength, so you hear Bajrangbali, like Hanumanji chants and stuff, so that reminds you that you have strength in you. It's like whatever you are praying, like if you're praying to Durga Ji, then there are certain characteristics that's associated with her, and you try and invite that in you. If you pray to Ramji, then there are certain characteristics that he's known for. So you are looking for that kind of characteristic in your life at that stage. So it's like kind of like positive affirmation in like a very layman language. So it's like, okay, if I every time think that I have strength in me and you're doing the Hanuman prayer, that's how I see it. If you're doing Ganesh, then it's like, okay, I don't know if it exists or doesn't exist, but it's like putting faith somewhere other than just believing in you, like you are the doer and you're gonna do everything.
Okay.
Just having this firm belief that okay, no obstacles because I pray to Ganesh
Okay.
for starting that.
No, that's right. So then in a certain sense, they become more symbolic for you.
Symbolic, yeah.
They're symbolic for you in that sense, but not true. Do you guys agree or disagree?
I have a concept that's somewhat similar but like more broader than this. It's
Okay.
like humans have different consciousness. So I might be working towards a different direction than her. And then we manifest idols. And that's how these all different stories and stuff is created within the external world.
Yeah.
But if you look at things, they all are internal, not external. So you could go worship these deities with different forms so that you get material benefits. That's what humans are always looking for.
Mm-hmm.
It could be, okay, I need more money, I could pray Lakshmi, I need more strength, I could pray to Hanuman. But then it's all within us and we made it external. And there's no restriction in making stuff external because Sanatana Dharma is like a fluid religion, not like it's a way of living life. So it's not like you have hard and fast rules. You're not going to worship any idol. You can do it if you want, but the true basis of everything is omnipresent. So it's like we believe everything is Him and nothing is Him as well.
Yeah.
It's like it's all within you when you manifest stuff. So it's like even if I do not want to like do some ritualistic process or listen to any chant, it's just making a positive habit. Like it's like, okay, I'm gonna play a game. It's all a video game that we all guys are playing.
Okay.
It's all hard coded with like a computer program. We all are gonna die at a certain age with different levels. We jump on like different things and things happen in our life. It's all coded and it's within the Maya.
Okay.
But we actually aren't doing anything. It's like some video game character or like
God simulation.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like an AI algorithm that's like governing our lives.
Right.
So even if I do not work, I could be rich because I could be born rich.
Yeah. All right. Anything? Anyone else? You want to say anything? You don't have to. I'm just asking. So I think it's an interesting question, right? And a lot of the references, like for example, when we're going through the Gita, a lot of the translators, when they're giving their commentary on the various verses, when the devas are brought up in some ways, or in a lot of these kinds of things, I think a lot of the modern commentators are trying to modernize some of the interpretation of it, where the various gods become sort of, in a sense, sort of symbolic of various sensory things. So Indra is sort of the king of the gods. He's sort of the ruler of the mind. He's sort of the deva of the mind. And then, you have Agni is, fire. And so it might be, I can't remember which sense, but, and then there's wind for your ears and, all of these kinds of things, right? Vayu, water for your tongue, and on and on and on. So I think there's that sort of layer of kind of intellectualizing it and making it a little bit feel more modern. But I think it's an interesting question because if we, on the one hand, yeah, we can say, well, maybe all those gods are just symbolic and it's just sort of to manifest that within us and maybe that's all it is. But I think the counter question would be, if we believe that there's sort of layers of consciousness or manifestations and layers of consciousness within the universe at an infinite scale, right? Or if, kind of the multiverse and parallel dimensions and realities, and if we believe that there are in some ways astral planes that are sort of somewhere in between, and all of this stuff, which is, it's kind of like, again, I love the example of like, we can only see these bandwidths of visible energy. We can't see infrared and we can't see microwaves. It doesn't mean they don't exist. It's just that we don't have the capability to see them. So if we think that we're somewhere in maybe the middle in terms of the spectrum of consciousness, right? Like sort of equivalent of the visible wavelengths of light, and that's what we can see, suspect. Could there be bandwidths of energy that are below us that we just can't detect, right? And so then all of those bandwidths of energy, right? You can. I don't know. Why don't you try it? Let's see if this is. could those lower frequency energies, could those be things that we perceive as demons and devils and, evil things of negativity? And then the higher frequency wavelengths of beings who maybe have now transcended the need for, like, their energy doesn't have to slow down enough to become embodied. And so then could those higher wavelength beings be, what we call devas or angels or whatever, and could those be they're just living on a higher wavelength in a different plane of consciousness? And so we call Ganesha, or we call a saint, let's say we're Catholics and it's Saint whoever, and we're calling to those powers, is there at least intellectual plausibility to that? I mean, obviously we have no way to detect that, but I can't tell you intellectually that doesn't happen. And isn't that basically, if we're talking about the different lokas or the heavens, right? Well, that's going to reflect where you are at energetically, right? So you'll go to that highest one, the Goloka or the Brahma Loka or whatever, if you're at that higher frequency wavelength versus if you're maybe pretty good, but you're not there, then maybe you go to Vaikuntha or you go to Indraloka or you go, wherever, right? Like all of those stories. But at the end of the day, what do they always say in all of the scriptures? Even the gods have to reincarnate, right? So even the gods have to sort of come back and finish it up because they're still within Maya. Right? So it's still all the gods, all the devas, all the rakshasas, all of that is still within Prakriti, realistically, right? It's still within maybe it's a higher vibrational length than we can appreciate, but it's still within Prakriti.
Yeah.
Right?
That does remind me of all those stories of Babaji and all, who did exist in person, like he had a body and a soul. And through the yoga, like power of yoga and meditation and all that stuff, they still exist and manifest themselves in different places, like
right.
in autobiography of the yogi.
Right.
There are a lot of instances.
Right.
But of course, to a human mind, it's incomprehensible.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So I mean, for me, I've kind of gotten to the point, where I personally have gotten to the point where I just try to stay agnostic in a sense when it comes to this question. I say, look, I ultimately believe there's one God behind all of it, personally, and that's the final destination. But within the Maya, within the manifest universe, within the Prakriti, yeah, maybe there are different layers of what we call heaven, what we call gods, what we call all of these things, and maybe that stuff does exist. Now, is that the highest manifestation? No. But I don't know that it's not there. So it'd be probably fairly arrogant of me to assume that it's not. Now, do I want to spend all of my time, energy, and devotion going to Indraloka? I mean, no. So I'm going to try to go higher than that. I'm going to try to kind of get to the highest. And I think that's what's trying to be encouraged here. So if you want to manifest, if you just want to worship Lakshmi and have lots and lots of money and success and this and that and all of that, okay, energetically, that's where you're at.
I got it. So it's like the Vaidevas that you just said, like it's like rather than focusing on one of the qualities or one of the manifestations, if you will be aiming towards that, you only get that, but rather have like a holistic look and for the Krishna, then that's what.
Because Krishna is the energy of the devas anyway.
I see. Okay.
They're just sort of the middle management.
Yeah.
Now, maybe you need middle management to, right? But he's the CEO.
Yeah.
So is this a bad example? So using the light example, if you have a white light and you run it through a prism, you get all these different colors.
Right.
That make up or part of the white light.
Right.
And you want to get to the white light instead of just one of these colors.
Yes.
That was a good example. Rather than just focusing on yellow color.
Yeah. So the white light is the light of consciousness. The prism is then going to be, in a certain sense, what we call Maya, right? Where it's getting bent into different wavelengths of energies, some higher and some lower. And we don't mean higher and lower in the sense of better and worse, just different energetics. And then that then splits out into the manifold universe. And then I think of us, I almost think if we want to use a Christian sort of language, I personally more and more think of earth as purgatory, in a sense. You know, we tend, like Catholics think of purgatory as something you go to when you're dead, right? I kind of think earth is purgatory in a way, more so. Maybe there's a lower energetic that it gets called hell, and there's a higher energetic that gets called heaven. But if you think about earth itself, we've got saints and we've got devils on earth in the flesh, right? And everybody in between. So, I mean, this to me seems like this would be the closest thing to purgatory that I can conceive of anyway. And then it's our choice. Are we going to try to energetically go higher? Or are we going to try to energetically, or not try, but are we going to allow ourselves to energetically go lower? You know, and that's kind of what purgatory is all about anyway, in a way. We're kind of in the middle.
I agree to you. It's like,
I mean, it's not exactly the same. I want to acknowledge that, but I'm just, you know.
I was like listening to a person like who makes videos on like Upanishads, and she was talking about it, and she told like the lower lokas or the hell, like we talk about, it's like state of mind, and we actually do not go there. It's like it's like the conditions we live in this world are like when we sleep we have certain dreams, or like in the material world we have certain desires. They could translate as hell for us.
Right. Exactly.
So in that example, the white light would be Krishna or the white light would be Brahman.
Well, then that goes into some of the different, like what you, I guess, believe. Right. And then that takes us back to there's differences of opinion of is the highest God, is it nirguna without qualities, or is it without, or saguna with qualities, right? And then they debate. So the Vedantins and some of those guys think of Brahman is going to be ultimately the highest, is going to be without qualities, right? Nirguna Brahman. Whereas some of the different schools, like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, right, who's you know who that is, right? He's the founder of like the Hare Krishnas, or not the founder of the Hare Krishnas, but that lineage kind of tracks back to this particular guru. In his philosophy, Krishna is higher than Brahman, right? And then they'll pull out quotes from the Bhagavad Gita to support that stance, right? And you're like, yeah, I mean, I can see how you can interpret it that way. You know, it says, I'm higher than Brahman, so then they're like, well, look, he says it right here. And so then it's like, okay, so I guess then it just depends on, do you interpret it that way, or do you interpret it that when Krishna is talking about stuff, he's talking about it through, in his mind, through that highest lens, and that he's referring to me because he's having a conversation with Arjuna and us. And so then how literally do you take that, I guess? Do you know what I mean? Again, me personally think the highest is without form. But like, I think I was joking with you because we've talked about this on several occasions. Like, listen, like, I'm like, again, kind of agnostic with it. If I sit there and I do my prayers and I'm like, look, if I can merge into the soup of bliss when I die, then merge back into Brahman and I'm happy and like, it's all good. Like, okay, cool. If at the end of the day, like I can go live in Goloka and go hang out with gopis and Krishna and go sing around and go do Hare Krishna, and that's what the highest thing is. Okay, yay. Like, I'm good with either, you know? So I think sometimes, yes, it's nice to intellectually think about it, but I think it's like either one of those is going to be basically bliss and not having to be reincarnated. It's still liberation on both fronts.
The goal is still to not be born again.
Exactly.
So when he says these creatures do not really dwell in it.
Okay, so that's a perfect segue.
The goal is that we have to live our lives that we dwell in Krishna.
Well, this is getting into philosophy. So this is a bit of philosophy. So this is a good segue into that. How are we doing with our time, by the way? Good. So an example that is a great example to help make this make sense of how do they live in him, but he doesn't live in them, is again that classical example of the rope and the snake. right? We talked about that, the rope and the snake, right?
It's when it's dark, you feel like it could be a snake, but when light comes, no, it's just a rope.
It's just a rope. So when there's the illusion of the snake, of the rope, we perceive a snake when in fact it is just a piece of rope. So in that sense, with that sort of example, that commonly used example, does the snake in a sense live within the rope, or does the rope live within the snake?
Snake.
Which has independent existence, snake or rope? Rope. The snake doesn't have independent existence. The snake only exists in your mind. Had there been no rope, there would have never been the misapprehension of snake. Okay? So the snake, the presence of snake is dependent on the presence of rope, but not the other way around. Or maybe a better,
Oh, okay.
did it click?
Yeah, I'm not confined with it. Okay.
Did it click?
Yeah.
Okay, let's use a couple of other common examples. You have a gold bangle on. There's bangle and there's gold. Which is the primary existence? Which is the secondary or dependent existence?
Gold is primary and bangle is secondary.
So the gold lives in the bangle, but the bangle doesn't live in the gold. Or mud and pots, ocean and waves, right? All of the silver or the pearl, the silver in the shell versus the shell itself, right? These are commonly given examples, right? So now when you read it, I pervade the entire universe in my unmanifested form. It's the background, to use the comment like Ramana Maharishi used, like with the movie screen, right? All of the drama of the manifold universe is the movie screen, but that movie screen is Burman, right? Just another example that's used. All creatures find their existence in me, but I am not limited by them, right? Gold and bangle. So I can have a gold necklace, I can have a gold ring, I can have a gold bangle, but the moment I get rid of gold, the bangle and the necklace, all those depend on it, right? So there's the real, and then there's the apparent, right? So, and again, if you look at,
But why am I thinking the other way? I'm just thinking if there is no bangle, there is no gold.
no, because I can melt the gold down, I can take your bangle, and I can melt it down, and then I can reformulate it and make earrings and a necklace. So the bangle only exists because of the existence of the gold. But the gold exists independent of the bangle.
Okay, in that nature form. Okay.
So that it's the point is that there's a one-way direction of existence. So the gold exists independently of the manifestation.
Okay, in that.
So the bangle, the earring, the necklace, those are just the particular manifestations of the gold. Once I remove the gold, then by definition, there's no bangle, there's no necklace, there's no nothing.
There can be a silver bangle.
There can, these are just examples.
So you do consider gold bangles Krishna and then silver bangles Ganesh.
Yeah. So the point is that one thing,
Form, bangle is a form and gold is like
the primary,
the nature.
yes. So I thought I had it in this one. Maybe it's in one of the other things coming up. Oh yeah. So if you look at the bottom of the first Mahavakya, the Tattvamasi, there's a couple of little bullets under there. There's the Nitya and Nitya, right? Those are two terms that come up often. So the Nitya, right, would be the gold, right? The Nitya, it's not completely real nor unreal, right? It's impermanent. There's a sort of an apparent reality to it. So the manifestation of all the creatures, all of this, all of us would be Nitya. Whereas God, Krishna, whatever, Brahman is Nitya. So that kind of is what this is saying, right? The creatures do not really dwell in me, although I bring them forth and support them. I am not confined within them. Gold transcends your particular bangle, right? The goldness of it transcends bangleness. It's beyond it, right? They move as winds move in every direction of space, right? So that's why, again, that's another thing that he'll use where in the coming up chapter, that he's all pervasive, like the ether, right? The air moves within space, but the space is unaffected, right? It's the backdrop of air of everything, but yet it stays removed. It's unaffected. Space is untouched by any of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it clears my confusion of that. I was thinking that good and evil both are him, but actually he's not defined by that.
No, because he's so I can take fire and cook my food. I can take fire and burn down my neighbor's house. The fire is, the sun can watch a wedding or someone helping save someone's life, and the sun can watch, someone murder someone, right? The same energy is going to be behind all of it. It's just then how is that energy manifesting itself? So what we call evil and what we call good, the highest energetic consciousness behind all of that is still going to be God, right? It's just then now we're stacking it down into nature. And then the actions, that's when then the nature of our actions start to stick with karma and all that. Because now it's within the modes, right? The modes working on the modes, nature working on nature. But the energy behind it, that consciousness behind it, is beyond all of that.
But it's like we define good and evil. There is nothing as good and evil. It's like even in the practice form, like you see certain tantrics or like they practice in like crimination grounds or like they have their own ways of tantra.
Right.
And we consider them as evil, but they say like you could achieve God by that as well.
Right. I mean, and that's the controversy. And I think it's the intention. This is why within the Gita, right, he's telling Arjuna to go kill people, right? But it's not that he's telling him to go kill people because we want to encourage killing. It's that now he's encouraging him to kill because he's defending goodness, right? So the tantrics, when they do their kind of the left-handed path of tantra, what those guys are trying to do is throw out these arbitrary and kind of sort of limiting definitions. They're like, look, if God is within everything, guess what? God is within sex, right? God is within wine. God is within everything. So why are we like doing these silly limitations? The Muslim doesn't want to eat pork. The Hindu doesn't want to eat the cow, right? Like, I mean, if you really think about it, like it's kind of silly and arbitrary, right? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, it's the same thing, right? So, that's kind of where the tantrics are going. But the danger with kind of falling into that is then you can start to justify and use that as an excuse.
That's true.
Right? And so that's where you have to be a little bit careful. Like, what is your true meaning and your true intention and your heart of hearts? Right? If you're just using that as an excuse, you're like, sweet, I can study Tantra and I can just go have tons of sex. That's awesome. And I'll call it Tantra and I'll have a tantric workshop at the Casa de Luz, right? And I can use that, or a retreat in Bali, and I can go have sex with all kinds of people and call it Tantra, but I'm still just manifesting my lust. I'm just packaging it now spiritual to justify my lust, right? Or if you think again, like if I'm doing puja so I can go to Indra's heaven, so I can have tons and tons of apsaras come and dance for me, and like I have dancing girls and I can have lots and lots of sex in heaven because that's my desire now. Or if I'm going to be a Muslim and I'm going to martyr myself and have 72 celestial virgins, that's all lust-based, right? So am I using religion to justify my lust? I think so, right? So that's where I think we have to really kind of be careful of going too far down that path, at least not consciously.
It's because like that's the word by tamasic mode of nature, and then
Right.
mode of illusion. So you get it.
You're still stuck within that.
Yeah.
And that's fine if that's what you want to do, but this is why when you go to Indraloka, you still have to come back.
Because you can't liberate yourself from the higher lokas, you need a human body to liberate yourself.
That's what they say. Right. So just a couple of other quick bullets, and then because I just want to, we're at noon. Just a couple of sort of, I guess, quotable quotes. One of the things that I think is important. So if we look at like 26, we've kind of talked about those other things. Are we clear off the other stuff, like those 4 through 6? Are we good on that? Okay, cool. Just one of the things that's really super commonly quoted is 26 and 27, right? Whatever I'm offered in devotion and with a pure heart, a leaf, a flower, fruit, water, I accept with joy. Whatever you do, make it an offering to me. The food you eat, the sacrifices you make, the help you give, even your suffering. To me, that's that highest karma yoga. That's that highest sannyasa. This is where you start to get that intersection. Again, we've talked so much about, well, is it karma yoga? Is it, jnana yoga? Is it bhakti yoga? These sort of arbitrary sort of silos that we've created in our own minds of the different paths, the different margas, right? But ultimately, it all is going to culminate into, well, truly your gnosis, right? Your, like, the Gnostic understanding of God is going to create devotion. And as you have that unitive knowledge of God, which then is manifesting, then you have devoted to that same God, jnana and bhakti become the same thing. And then all of your actions just naturally are going to get devoted to that. You're naturally going to become a renunciate in a sense, because you're not looking for external things to fulfill you. You're fulfilled within yourself with that highest understanding. So this is where the jnana and the bhakti and the karma all sort of come together as one sort of singular thing. And all these little trails that we've been talking about and like worrying about all kind of become somewhat meaningless, right? It's just the beginner stages of trying to get you on the journey.
But will that be counted as like ritualistic stuff, or it's just like just feel it and devote everything to me?
Well, ritualistic stuff in what way do you mean?
Like offering, like if you're cooking your food, first you offer it to Krishna,
right,
and then eat it as a prasad. So is it like ritualistic stuff, or it's like, okay, my wife cooking, I'm thinking that it belongs to him, but I eat it because Krishna is eating it.
I think it's more the internal attitude that really makes the biggest difference.
Rather than the physical ritual.
Yeah, because it's what's going on inside of you. And I think that's the point of this. It's kind of like I'm not going to do it justice, but I read a funny or heard or something, I come across this thing that like everything that we're doing when we're doing like say pujas, it's, God is doing prayer to God to get boons from God. It's like Shiva's worshiping Shiva to talk about Shiva to get Shiva stuff. It's like it's all ultimately, if we think everything is, we're God anyway. We're worshiping ourselves again as God to get God's stuff. It's all that, right? So it's all just sort of this big cosmic game. So this is why when you say like, a leaf, a flower, like what are you going to offer God?
Yeah.
It's already His. So it's like when you're little, when your child comes and gives you this a sticker that you bought them, and they give you back the sticker. You're like, oh, thanks, sweetie. That's so sweet of you, right? And you're like, yeah, you bought that over at Target like yesterday, right? Like, what does God need? So the only thing that in that sense, it's for our benefit that we're doing this.
Recognition that.
Right.
Yeah, I agree to that point, and I was like reading a quote by, there was a mystic poet called Kabir.
Yeah.
He said like, why do I chant Ram's name? Why doesn't Ram chant my name?
Right. That's funny.
What was the end?
I mean, like, I don't know.
Why doesn't Ram chant Kabir?
I don't know. I'll share it in the group like once I read.
It was like prose because he
Writes in like poetry.
Yeah, I was like listening to something, and then like someone was translating what the Kabir said, and then it got translated like that. Like why do I chant Ram's name and why doesn't Ram chant my name? And today while coming here, I was listening to like a lecture by Osho, and then he was like, we all are addicts. Like one guy has a smoking addiction, he wakes up and smokes, and one guy has a name chanting addiction, and he wakes up and chants the name. But what's the difference?
Yeah, well, Osho's a whole other animal. He's a complicated fellow, right? We'll leave him alone just because it's going to make things more complex in the discussion. He's a whole other animal altogether. two really quick things that I wanted to, and again, one of the things that I think sometimes, again, when we're studying Hinduism, and I'm certainly guilty of it, is in that Christians do very well. And I'm pointing to poor Peyton because he's grown up in the church and he's just learning all about weird Hinduism stuff, is a sense of grace and a sense of redemption. Because I think like one of the ladies that came to one of the meetings and we were talking about perfection, and it's like, and I think, and I'm certainly guilty of this in a way, it's like, with karma, and you think about how many lives you've had and how much good and bad and all this stuff, it almost seems like it's an impossible task to get off of the wheel of rebirth, right? And it's like, how am I ever going to undo all of my karmas? Like, I can't do this by myself. Whereas like with Christianity, I think one of the big appeals, and again, not to say that because it can get abused or misused, but that sense of grace, that sense of redemption, that sense of being born again in a sense, to sort of find your divinity and to have that redemptive quality versus kind of the sort of brutal karma, just kind of the grind wheel of karma, that it seems like it's almost impossible to escape. Like, how am I ever going to get perfect enough, right, to escape the wheel of birth and death? It can be very discouraging, I think, in many ways. And I think that's what gets lost a lot when you are listening to various lectures and gurus and stuff talk about it when we're talking about Hinduism. But like in here, and then in the future chapters too, when they talk about stuff, like 30, for example, like sort of the redemption of sinners, right? Even sinners become holy when they take refuge in me alone. Quickly their souls conform to Dharma, right, righteousness, and they attain a boundless peace. Never forget this, Arjuna. No one who is devoted to me will ever come to harm. All of those who take refuge in me, right, whatever their birth, race, all that, this can be attained even by those whom society scorn, right? So I think that's one thing that, again, so when we go back to bhakti to kind of talk about devotion, I think that sense of kripa, right? Kripa is the word for God's grace. And I think that sometimes gets lost when we're talking so much about almost very surgical, academic kind of karma, right? And that there is a potential for that interventionary kind of sense of God's divinity and can help us if we're sincere in our devotion and repent for whatever bad things that we've done. You know what I mean? So I just wanted to kind of point that out because again, and then the final thing is, 34, the final thing, right? So fill your mind with me, love me, serve me, worship me always, seeking me in your heart, you will at last be united with me, right? Now, whether that's Krishna and Goloka or whether that's Brahman and I don't know. We'll cross that bridge when we get there, right? I guess. But, so I think that that's something that's important to kind of keep in mind because it's certainly for me, it can get discouraging. It's like, I want liberation, but man, like, am I ever going to be perfect enough? Living more in the world, taking care of family, going to job, making the mistakes that we make in our lives, losing our temper, doing stupid stuff. It's like, am I ever going to be good enough to get off this wheel? And it can kind of be daunting, almost you feel like giving up. Like, well, screw it. You know what? Like, I'm going to be reborn anyway. I guess we may as well have some fun. Not that, you know what I mean, but, So anyway, I just wanted to point that out, that is here in this philosophy, and I think it doesn't get probably talked about enough. And again, Christians are very good about that because that's such a center point of their theology with Christ and the crucifixion and all that stuff. So any comments on any of that?
I have.
Okay.
It's like, as you said, like, would I ever be like off this cycle of rebirth? And while listening to like one of the person I was listening to, and she talks about Upanishads, and it's like, I don't remember the exact 5 things that she told, but it was like one of them was ego. Humans have a higher ego than animals and plants. So you have that surety that you're not going to be reincarnated in an animal, insect or like a tree. You're going to get a human birth. That's for sure. Because humans don't need their ego, but animals do, and they live in fear.
Right.
Whereas humans can be like fearless at a certain point of time. But if you're not attached to the materialistic desires, then we're free of ego as well, and then we can move upwards.
Yeah. Anyone else?
I'm just gonna have faith.
Okay.
I'm just gonna have faith that I get out of this cycle. boyfriend.
Well, we try, right? I mean, you do the best you can, right? I mean, we try and you have a certain amount of surrender and devotion and ask for grace. And I mean, I think you do our part, that's your karma yoga. You learn and you study, that's your jnana yoga. Your bhakti yoga is acknowledging that part of it, you know? So I think that's why it all kind of integrates together.
Yeah. Like I've read Gita twice, but I've read the ISKCON's translation, which I mean I found it confusing and I'm not reading it continuous text. So I couldn't put the puzzle pieces together. And then now when we're reading it together, so it's like, okay, is karma yoga better? Then it's like, okay, is jnana yoga better? Like, okay, is dhyan yoga, the meditation one better? But then now as we go into bhakti, it's all, you know, it's whatever you do, be it karma yoga, jnana yoga, or meditation, you have to dedicate it to the supreme energy.
Right.
The puzzle is coming together.
Really? Really? That's exciting. That's happy, right?
But isn't it like in chapter 12, Krishna says the most loved one is the bhakti you.
Yes.
Because love is the only way to find me.
Yes.
That's how we see like Krishna's energies in like Radha, that's his female manifested form.
Right.
Because he wants to show love, but he got married to another woman, but he had love with Radha, so that love's the original form through which you can achieve Brahman or Krishna itself.
Right.
Even with Shiv, we have like Shakti, so it's
Yes.
love's the only way to like.
The highest is love.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, as much as the intellectuals, you know, I mean, like, you know, yeah. And, you know, and I think one of the things, at least, again, for me, that, like, I always kind of, I think part of the reason for me I've become, I don't want to say suspicious, but bhakti is not personally as appealing because I'm more heady than, you know, emotional. But I think also because you can see how unchecked emotionality can get abused with religion. And so for me, that's always been a little bit, I've always been wary of that. And then, you know, and then again, this is me, this is my editorializing, so forgive me. Like if you go to like an ISKCON thing, it feels very performative to me. And I don't like that. Like I think devotion is quiet. I think it's contemplative. I think it's a relationship. I think it's that. But and I'm not putting it down, but you know, that you know, you go and everyone's suddenly doing Radhe Radhe, right? Or you go to Radha Madhava Dham, or you go up with Mukundananda up in Dallas, and you know, all you've got, and everyone's suddenly doing the Chaitanya thing, right? And it's fine, but it's like, are you really doing that? Or you go to a Pentecostal church or a Christian church, right? And it's all Jesus, right? And they're all putting up their hands and they're falling over and they're, you know, and like for me, that's always been a little turnoff for me. I'm just like, come on. Like it's gross, right?
Worshiping Jesus, they know, like, you know.
Yeah, you know, but I think when we can redefine bhakti a little bit differently and realize that isn't necessarily how bhakti has to manifest. Bhakti can be in the small hours where you're talking to God within your heart, when you're asking for help, when you're asking for grace, when you're asking for guidance, when we're giving thanks, when we're having gratitude for the good things we have. That's bhakti. Reading the Bhagavad Gita with the intention of understanding it and knowing God is bhakti. We sit here and think it's jnana, but it's actually bhakti, right? So in that sense, when I start to think of bhakti that way, then bhakti becomes less icky for me.
But is it us reading Bhagavad Gita, or is it the Brahman's desire for us to know him?
Right, absolutely.
Like we are here because we think we want to read or we want to get that intellect, but is it really us, or is it like he wants us to know about him?
Right.
And we know that, and even Ashtavar said that like intellect's not the way to achieve God, it's wisdom.
Right.
And
Right.
we could read about him, we could talk about him, but it's like that's why like the modern day Buddhism's not being practiced the way it was told, because Buddha was against idol worship, and now they make a statue of Buddha itself.
Right.
Because following Buddha's tracks more complex than worshipping Buddha. So worshipping is an easier way to do it.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, for me also bhakti, like you said, okay. I mean, I cannot worship and attend people in the room. I need like my own solitude. I not chant or do anything, I just sit quietly. But
Right.
that is what bhakti is for me.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
It's
funny.
not ritualistic at all. Like, all this puja, how they create that.
Right.
This funny incident happened. So I was in India at my mom's place, and she does puja every day. So that's devotion for her, and it goes on for like hours, different phases. And I just shower and they're like, hello, hi, and I just leave. So later on, when I was coming there, I was like, oh, I need some dhupati and incense and stuff because it's the good quality ones. So she's like, do you do puja there? I'm like, yeah, of course I do. Like, we never did it here. I'm like, oh, because mine is more quiet. Mine doesn't involve hours, but it's more of like,
Right.
Just a name chant maybe, just something that you're feeling. And I told her, and what you were saying, that are you doing it or somebody's wanting you to do it? And I felt that the magic actually happens there. There's no need, no ask, nothing. It's just like a thanks and embrace that I'm in a mental state where I can recognize that there's something which is supreme than me, which is within me. But and that's how I don't know, I have like a long list, but it's like I see how that leads me to the places where I see magic happening, which I know is not ordinary, but it's happening because of that faith inside me or that devotion inside me. So that I related with what you said. If it's loud, if it's like the most celebrated temple in India or something, most powerful, I may not feel anything there. But it's something out in very deserted place or something, and it's just me and my feelings. I'll probably cry there.
Right.
Not like really, but it just happens.
Can you get me some chai? Yeah, I mean, we traveled a lot through India. We went all over the place. We traveled, we took Gayatri and our daughters, and we went Rishikesh, Varanasi, Haridwar, more temples than I could ever even imagine and count. And then we went to Buddhist stuff in Thailand. I mean, it's just endless. And after a while, like, we're like, God's not here for us.
All the famous ones, you might not feel it there.
No, we're like, we don't feel anything here. I feel, and I've said for many, many years, I feel God's presence much more, watching the sunrise, in nature or something like that. That's where I see and feel God's
those
presence.
tiny moments of where you're not expecting or planning anything,
Right.
but things are happening according to somebody's wish, that you're ending up somewhere where you're feeling something which is pure bliss.
Right. Nice. Anything else on that? Beautiful.
Corruption in all the temples.
Well, let's not get into that. I don't want to go there. That's a whole nother comment. Okay, just really, really quick, because we're running out of time. I just wanted to orient you to kind of on the paper. And there's a bunch in here, by the way. Please read it. It's stuff to kind of complement stuff. This goes back to what Irene was talking about in that thread of kind of the evolution of thinking. And so this isn't me making this up. And whether or not people always believe in this or not is you can decide for yourself. But where it says which philosophy is true / which to follow. So they kind of liken it to the rungs on a ladder where dualism is going to be sort of the entry point for most of us because it's the easiest for us to understand. Then we go to a qualified non-dualism, and then we go to pure non-dualism. So there's an evolution based on this adhikara bheda, right? So that differences, that level of understanding that you may have in sort of your journey or your spiritual journey and what you can kind of make sense of or what's going to resonate true with you or whatever. And so then these are just sort of the steps of kind of that evolution of your sort of your philosophical, theological journey. So just beneath it, I just wanted to introduce, and we don't have time to go through all of it, but the Vishishta Advaita means the qualified non-dualism. So in the upcoming chapters, I'm going to have Madhavacharya, Chaitanya, a couple of other like more bhakti-oriented schools as we get more into bhakti yoga in these upcoming chapters. So I sort of started with it somewhat backwards. If you see the Advaita Vedanta, Adi Shankaracharya, which we've talked about, I didn't want to talk about that or didn't want to highlight that because we've talked about so much of that philosophy already that it's kind of redundant. But I think just understanding and I think in many ways, this is kind of realistically where I'm at in terms of just my understanding in a lot of ways. It's a lot easier for me to conceptualize. So Ramanuja, that qualified non-dualism, thinks of all of us as sort of sparks in the bigger fire, right? We're the same as the fire, but we're not the entirety of the fire. Or we're the ocean, yes, we're the ocean and we're the water of the waves, but we're not the entirety of the ocean. Or we're cells, everything in the universe is cells in the body of God. So we're ultimately God, but we're not necessarily the entirety of God, right? So that's that qualified non-dualism. Yes, we're the same stuff, but we're not all of that in its entirety.
It's limited by the consciousness.
Yeah, like we're cells, and we're parts of the body of God, but we're not all of God, right? So that's the qualified non-dualism. Versus when you get to some of the true dualism, Madhava, Chaitanya, there's God and then there's us, and we're separate, and we're always separate, and we're not the same thing. We're Christians or Jews or Muslims. I mean, a lot of religions, right? There's God and then there's us. There's God, there's the universe, and then there's us, right? They're always separate. Whereas, this is like, no, we're the same stuff, but we're part of him, but we're not the entirety of him, versus complete monism or non-dualism is we're all the exact same thing. We're all just the entirety of God consciousness. And that's where you get into those really high, the Ashtavakra Gitas and some of that kind of stuff, or the Karika, the Mandukya Upanishad, where that's when it's just like, it's like,
You think you are the universe.
huh?
Then you think you are the universe.
You're the universe. You are the entirety of it. But I don't know about y'all, but I'm not there yet. Like, that's hard to wrap my head around.
I used to watch Sri Krishna, like the TV show, and he was a baby and you open his mouth.
Yes.
The whole universe inside was like, oh, the whole universe is inside me.
Exactly. But are we there yet? Right? They're laughing because we just watched The Life of Pi last night.
Okay.
And
It's in the life of Pi.
it's in The Life of Pi. He was reading the Amrita Katha books. And in it, he's like, where he's learning about Krishna, and then he learns about Jesus, and then he learns about Islam.
Yeah.
And then in the movie, he looks,
It was a comic book.
Yeah, it was the comic book, and it shows that where Yashoda is he opens his mouth and she sees the universe. And then in the movie, when he's on the boat with the tiger's looking into the ocean, and it's sort of all like, it's sort of like the ocean is like, it's the same thing, but it's all ocean creatures. And then it kind of pulls back up, and then it's Pi, so it was sort of a callback to that. So that's why we literally watched that last night. So anyway, so I just wanted to put some of these highlights of kind of just sort of some of the bigger parts of Ramanuja's philosophy, just to put it in. Again, I'll put some similar stuff for the other guys coming up. It's mostly just wanted to introduce it, because again, for me personally, like, I had read so many books on Hindu philosophy and never read one word about Ramanuja. Never read one word. I never had any philosophical basis to understand any of these other guys and kind of different ways to look at it. I just figured it was like Shankaracharya, like, he came in and that was sort of, he was the end all be, like, he was the final word, because most of the Swamis now speak from that sort of perspective for the most part, And so I was like, oh, well, I guess that's the final word, and that's that. And then I come across these guys, and I'm like, oh, whoops. I guess there's some other counter narratives out there too that they don't all necessarily agree, which I think is good. It's kind of refreshing, because again, just like there's different interpretations of Christian doctrine or Islamic doctrine, there is also different interpretations of Vedic doctrine as well. And so I think it's good to have a richer understanding of all of it, because it helps you, I think, understand the evolution of your own consciousness journey, I suppose. Any other comments?
So,
Really quick, we got a couple minutes.
okay, this is just the last question is, we know like as we talked, that's the only way, but then how do we practice it? Like, I know like some people would chant, some people would meditate, some people would like look at a land, some people would look at the nature, but then what's the way in which we could experience it? And is there a need to experience it, or there is no need to experience it as well?
Well, I mean, I think that kind of goes back to the beginning. I mean, I guess the thing that comes to mind when you're asking this, I think that goes back to almost the beginning of the session when we're talking about all the various gods and devas and all of this. Do you use that figure of Krishna? Is that your Ishta Devata, right? Your that sort of form of God. Do you prefer to pray to a formless God? Do you prefer to pray to a form God? What really works well for you? And then I think then realistically, how do we experience that love? I think we ideally would experience that love through doing our actions, with like dedicated devotion to God. Because then if I do my day-to-day life as karma yoga, right, I'm devoting everything to God. If I'm devoting something to you, I love you. I'm devoted to you, right? So I think how do we ideally manifest it? It's that we manifest it in all of our actions through dedication of all of our actions to God, right? So then we're constantly, and then in that sense, to even keep that mindset, you have to have dhyan. You have to have a certain level of concentration and right, almost meditation to even keep that in mind, right? So then that dhyana, Raja Yoga type stuff comes into play because now I have to have that ongoing concentration to even remember God in order to devote my actions to God. And then through doing that, then I come to have that intuitive knowledge of God in the meantime, that jnana, right, the gnosis, if we want to use Latin or Greek, I guess, right? And so then I think ideally that our whole life then becomes a moving, walking meditation, to use sort of the Buddhist kind of framework where every breath, every action, every thought becomes, in a sense, where it's a living, walking, breathing meditation on our highest self, and however we understand that. Now, if you want to pray to a form, so for me, I'll just again talk to myself, like about myself. Like for many, many years, I was again talking about bhakti and just my own evolution. Like I always wanted non-dual stuff. I always wanted formless stuff. I'm like when I was in India and they were talking about, they were going to give us, what do you call it? Mantra, like mantra diksha, right? And, I was like hoping the Swami was going to give me like something super abstract, right? Like that was going to be a Aham Brahmasmi or, whatever, right? Because I'm a Vedantin and I'm very intellectual and I like jnana yoga and look how smart I am, right? And I don't need this like silly bhakti stuff and doing hare kind of stuff, right? And I got, an Ishta Devata got, mantra on a form. And I was kind of like, oh, dude, no, I loved it and it was good. But for me, like, I had to finally realize that, like, realistically, even though intellectually maybe I understand things at a certain level, but on a day-to-day life, it's easier for me to relate to Krishna than it is for me to relate to an abstract Brahman. Not that I can't understand that, I can. But when life is hitting you and you're feeling crappy, it's hard to kind of, at least for me, to sit there and talk to abstract God. You can, nothing's wrong. So I think it's just what works well for you. And I think just taking honest stock of like where you're at on your journey. Because I think if you're at a certain point, I think it makes more sense to be realistic with where you are, not where you think you want to be, And then I think then and that's for me. So I had to sort of, I don't want to say humble myself because that sounds so egotistical, but realize that maybe actually that's better for me. Even though maybe philosophically I understand higher level stuff, but maybe that's just where I'm at with my evolution. And and if it's good enough for Ramakrishna to sit there and worship Kali, who the heck am I to say, oh, I'm too good to like worship Krishna? Like, I mean, come on, like that seems silly. So I think you can't at once understand higher philosophical concepts. You can't at once appreciate the Upanishads and appreciate these higher things at one level, but if it's not calling to your heart, then this is where again you can't get liberated without the love, right? And this is where you get all these pundits, right, who are going to argue and they know the Vedas inside and out and they can argue it but there's no love in it. It's all very dry and it's all very intellectual and there's no devotion behind it. Even though they know everything intellectually. I don't know if that answers your question. But. So I think there's no right or wrong answer. This is why there's 330 million gods, because it's about where are you energetically in your relationship with the divinity.
Yeah. I think
I don't know if that's.
I agree to you for what you said, but I think like that's cracking me up in the head a lot because like we've been raised in a way like me that if you have any problem you go pray to God. But after reading all this, that's useless because God's not going to intervene. But it's like contradictory because God says I'm partial towards my devotee, but on the other hand, it's like karma is going to define your life.
Yeah.
Arjun had to fight the war, and if Krishna was helping him, he could have just made the war go in like a second. So he had to do it. Then the Pandavas had to climb the Himalayas, and like they all started dying. Like they were going to different heavenly planets or places.
Yeah.
So if it's all illusion and it's all like fake things around us, that's changing my thought process, and I'm like scared. Like, would that make me a lazy person? Because prior to like meeting you, I was like 24/7. Like I used to worship God and believe in Krishna, but I was like, okay, money, and
Right.
but now it's like if it's gonna come, it's gonna come, even if I don't do the work.
No, but no one's saying that you don't do self-effort, right?
I mean,
That's the Purushartha, right? You have to do self-effort. No one's saying that you just sit there. They're not advocating that at all.
But that's gonna happen automatically. It's like if I'm meant to work, I'll work automatically.
Yeah, but I mean, you still have that responsibility, right? I mean, there's in one of the earlier ones, right? It's like you have to still do your part, and then you surrender. That's the basis of the karma yoga, right?
Yeah.
Is that I'm going to do what I can do, and then I'm going to understand that there are a lot of things that are outside of my control that are within my whatever the worldly karmic outside forces, however we want to call that I could have all the best intentions of the world. I can work as hard as I want, but if that thing is not meant to be for whatever reason, it's not going to happen. Or I can make it happen, but it's going to be a constant uphill struggle. Right? So that's that interplay of your Purushartha and then the grace coming back down the other side, and that interplay. Right?
Yeah.
Or like again, when we talked about karma and we talked about like your prarabdha, right? Like your karma for this life. And what's the difference between destiny and karma, right? And so the example that is given is that what you need in life is your destiny, but like your karma, it's the Purushartha. So if the river is flowing at 10 miles an hour, you can either swim up the river and, at 15 miles an hour and but you're having to swim upstream, or you can swim downstream in line with the river. So you're going plus -5, or you're going plus 25, right? So we have that free will. That's the interplay of that free will, that Purushartha, within the larger context of the prarabdha, right? The karma that's coming down for us. So there's an interplay of those two forces there. So it's not completely passive, like, well, whatever's meant to be is going to be, and I just sit here passively and do nothing. No one's talking about that. Right? But you're not completely in control, because you can do everything right and it still fails because COVID happens, or the stock market crashes, or whatever, and there's nothing you can do about that. So there's an interplay.
But Ashok said, like, we talk about free will in the material world, but if it's all illusion, then what is free will? And then
Yeah, but then you're going into those really high abstractions. Right? And again, maybe this is again that ladder, right? I mean, maybe that's ultimately at the highest truth. I mean, if you go to that highest truth, then again, for me, the danger of going there and sitting there intellectually is you can go very nihilistic, very easily. Like, well, what? It's all illusion. It's all fake. It's all just God's will. It's all none of it's real. So why do anything? And nothing matters. So then where are you not, how are you not gone nihilistic right there?
but that's how your desires are going to do. Because let's say I'm working and I have a desire, I want to buy a Ferrari next year. And that desire goes away because cars just a transport of medium from point A to point B, and my desire of Ferrari vanishes.
It does. No, I know, but you understand, like, there's a balance that you have to somehow negotiate between those two. Because that's the opposite sort of extreme. And again, maybe at a certain point, if you're just going to sit in a cave and meditate and 2 rotis a day that are donated to you and you're just going to bliss out, then perhaps, right, that's okay to kind of sit in that level of consciousness. But if we're here interacting with the day-to-day life, that's not super plausible for us to do for the most part. And so, yeah, maybe at that highest level, that's the highest truth. But most of us don't live in that world. And so then, do we then just sort of, in a certain sense, accept sort of maybe like, yes, maybe at the highest point of things, that's where the truth of things are. but I can't live like that. So I need to live here, right? So again, I used the example last time, I think, where yeah, maybe quantum physics and quantum cosmology is the highest truth with it's a projected universe and string theory and, the split, light, the split, light, and all that. But if I want to design an airplane to fly somewhere, I need Newtonian physics, not quantum physics. So is quantum physics at a certain level higher and more, maybe higher truth and closer to the consciousness of God? Probably. But I'm not going to rely on that for Bernoulli's principle to put an air under my wings to fly me somewhere. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's why I like that example, because it's like at a certain point, that really high abstract stuff, which I love, by the way. I dig all that stuff. That's my jam. But I still have to drive to work and put gas in my tank and deal with my kid and, work a job I don't want to work and hate my boss. You know what I mean? Like, we still have that day-to-day life. And so finding that balance.
And I think the initial question that you had asked about love and like how I interpret like through service, like all said and done is cool. Like all of these spiritual, philosophical information, being self and associating self to God and all is cool. But if there's no service, the whole point of love is gone. So it's like thinking beyond yourself as well. Because just imagine that you're a tool established here to help whichever community, whichever society you're sitting in. So all these personal desires of like Ferrari or Rado or anything else, they are there because you're thinking very self-centric or something. But when you start thinking, okay, you got like tons crores of money, how you can utilize it. So that's where like the service and the love sort of comes in. And somehow like you start having fun in that. You start seeing like the whole thing that that's your way of helping the God or like just serving the God. It's all like devotion or service.
I agree. But it was like, what's the point of making my inner God unhappy by not driving a Ferrari?
That's where you're at, then that's where you're at. It's okay. It's like, Arjun, we made a comment a few sessions ago. She's like, well, what if I just want to be a good person and have a simple life and be a good person and not bother anybody and raise my kid and just live my life? And do I have to do all this stuff? And the answer is like, well, no. But the thing is that you're searching for permanent happiness in a world that is by definition impermanent. And so guess what? You could try to leave everything alone and make it perfect, and it can be perfect for a time, but then your husband loses his job, or your kid gets cancer, or something bad happens, right? The economy crashes. So when we're trying to search for permanent happiness in an impermanent world, this is again to stick back to the Buddha, right? Oh, what's first noble truth? Life is dukkha, right? It's suffering, right? And it's not because it's so pessimistic. It's just that I gain I want something, I suffer to get it. I gain it, I suffer to keep it. Right? So I'm suffering on both sides of it. So how does he say to get rid of the suffering? Is you reduce those desires. Does that mean you have to be fully desireless? No. Right? But you also have to understand that the Ferrari will fulfill the desire for a while, but eventually you're going to want a Bugatti or whatever. Right? And so that's just the nature of humanity. That's just the nature of us. And so I think then it's at a certain point when we recognize that spiritually, something deep in us that maybe we can't even explain. You say, you know what? That's why I've made the joke that I think spiritual people are the ultimate thrill seekers. Like, I'm an adrenaline junkie, like big time. But I realize that like these things are not going to give me permanent joy. And I want permanent joy. I'm tired of the ups and the downs. So I'm willing to get rid of the lower things in order to gain the higher thing. It's a trade-off in a certain sense, because I want the permanent joy. I want to go to Vaikuntha or go Loka or merge with Brahman or whatever it is, because I'm tired of the joys and sorrows of life. Right? That's why we're all here. I mean, in that sense. All right, we're over. We unfortunately, I love you all, but we're going to have to close. All right. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschit Dukhabhat Bhavet. Om Asatoma Satgamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityoma Amritangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. I appreciate y'all coming and talking and everything. You can take it, just take it, because
I'm gonna go for a
huh?
run, so.
We'll take it, 'cause-
Let's take a picture.
All right. If everyone, if you have any garbage, if you could just throw it in the green bag, that would help.
See you. Happy New Year.
Yeah, my friend. Yeah. You too, bud.
Happy New Year.
Thanks, you too. I'll see you later. All right, let me stop the. Let's see if this actually worked.